So for better, for worse, here we go. Closer? Well, I'll move back a bit.
Hold the mic.
I will. Okay. Thank you. We have to be footage. Should I button up?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, good. What impressed me was that in a lot of talks I've heard today, the people who've given the talks have recognized the same traits in the relationship between Susan and Michael that I have seen, and have basically expressed that in different words, but very similar to what I saw. And in my experience, what I observed with Michael and Susan was a very unique relationship that I have not observed very often and is worth celebrating. And I'm glad other people have recognized a similar thing. So I'm going to start off basically. I'm going to read this and gloss over some issues that, skip over some issues that have been repeated earlier. But so we are here today to recognize and toast two special people, and to take part and to celebrate their marriage to each other. Susan and Michael are two remarkable individuals. Each has lived a life following his or her vision, instinct, and heart. And boy, each has had a unique adventure. As Sue and Francie and Peter know, I'm sort of an astronomy buff. And I like to think of Sue and Michael as two comets in our solar system. Two comets grow up distant from each other, each soaking up the experiences of the immediate environment of their orbits around the sun, oblivious to what lies outside that orbit. But maybe 1,000 years or so, the comets might approach each other and maybe close enough to feel the gravitational attraction of the other. And perhaps they come to a slow dance and begin to rotate each other, around each other. That's what I imagine happened between Sue and Michael. Finding a life mate in a stressful, fast-moving times is not easy. In Sue and Michael's case, both eventually decided to increase their chances by enrolling in a site for outdoor fitness-oriented individuals. Yeah, that's right. Now what's remarkable is they landed at the same website. Michael before Susan, and Michael actually hadn't had that much success at that point with that website, and had decided to terminate his contract with that site. So on his last day, this is what I learned from Michael, from our first contact with Michael 2 years ago when we were with him for 2 or 3 days with Susan in Santa Monica. And it just shows how much he opens up and talks from his heart during that time. So on his last day, he made one last online attempt to meet someone. And exactly on that day, Susan came online for her first time, and they met. And so they met each other, and each was intrigued enough with the interesting differences between the two of them to want to proceed. Michael gave Sue his phone number because at the time his contract had expired. He would not be able to contact him through the internet further.
That's true.
And they made a date to meet for coffee.
Wow.
Now that meeting was quite a sequence of events. It was the result of quite a sequence of events and each event had to take place in a rather precise way in order for Susan and Michael to have that one chance to meet each other. And because of that, I believe strongly that it is their fates to have met. So, how did that first meeting over coffee first take place? Well, I think you've heard that in several forms today. Sue was obviously driving to the coffee. Her car broke down on the side of the road. She called for Michael to come, and he volunteered to come and help her. Michael drove up in his car, saw her in the distance, pulled over to the side of the road, walked up, and then saw the car she was driving. We all know what his impressions of that was. Susan was in the car. Susan was in the car, saw this man approaching him, and we all have heard what her impressions of him were at that time, and that was it. So let's see, how do I go from here? Well, okay, Sue and Michael seemed to hit it off pretty quickly. Before we knew it, Sue had surprised Michael by giving him a couple tickets to the Foo Fighters concerts, whoever they are. And never heard of them before in my life. And Michael had accompanied Sue on her NGO trip to El Dorado, Kenya, where he made a documentary of her work there. And that was pretty much outside of Michael's sphere of expertise, of experiences.
I have some behind the scenes footage.
Okay, so of course. Okay, so let me point out to the audience here that El Dorado is in the western part of Kenya. It's 1.3 miles above sea level, and it's where most of the Kenya long-distance runners train for marathons. Well, of course, Michael would meet one of the top marathon runners there. Of course. Who else? Anyone who's as gregarious as Michael is going to do that. And so what happened was that Michael and Susan were invited to have dinner with this runner's family in their small hut. And during that event, the runner suggested that both Michael and Sue join him in the marathon town race that they were having that weekend. Well, okay. Well, I think that the high altitude must have affected Michael and Sue in terms of their judgment and their decision making, because they decided, without any training for a marathon, to go with it. And they both completed the race, sort of. Each has a marvelous story that only they can tell you, and I'm not going to get into that. But it's remarkable. No, really, I would not do it justice. So now back to the present. Today I gave away my daughter, Susan, and that is really hard for any father. But I must say that I couldn't be happier than to give her away to Michael. And that's because Francie and I had spent a few days with Michael and Sue a couple years ago. And I recognized immediately in Michael a warm person who spoke openly from his heart. His love for my daughter was apparent, and he knew that he would always support and love Sue. So with no more words, let's have a final toast to Michael and Sue on their marriage.